Hello, this is Jacques LaFrance, author of Heaven is Beyond Imagination. That's this book here. I'm going to tell you how it got started and what it means, and we'll look at some of the details in it. I spent 27 years teaching computer science at three different universities, but um, at the first one, I was visiting someone, and then in their home, I saw on their coffee table a book from uh, Dwight Ritchie, Return from Tomorrow. Well, I looked at it. That looked pretty interesting. So I ordered a copy and I read it. That was my first book of someone's experience dying and going to heaven and coming back. Well, I was intrigued. So I ended up buying more books as I discovered them. I had 16 in all. So uh, and I had the opportunity to teach a class at church, and I chose talking as my topic. What do we learn about heaven from these people that have been there? And each time we met, we'd pick some topics, and I'd look through the books and read to them what different people said about that. Well, they liked that very much, so I thought I would do it again, but I didn't want to have to go back and forth between 16 different books picking out things to read to them. So I started copying out the parts that I needed to use, and the manuscript got pretty big, and I thought this could be a book. So that was the first edition. It was called What We Learn About Heaven from People Who Have Been There. It was based on 18 eyewitnesses. Well, I spent money with a publisher and never made enough money from selling them to pay that off. So I got 16 more books and read them and added 16 more testimonies and wrote a new version called Heaven is Amazing. Well, that one I found a different publisher who had some capability of promoting it. Was Trinity Christian Publishers, who's affiliated with TBN. Well, they did feature it for 1 week on one of their TBN shows, for 2 times in the morning and 2 times in the evening for a week. Uh, well, that caused a lot of sales right away, but then it dwindled off, and they charged me a lot of money for that, and I never did get that money back. So I said something else has to happen. I bought 16 more books, all that I could find, everything that Amazon had that talked about experiences in heaven. I read all of them and added their testimonies to my book. Now it was up to 50 testimonies, and I called it Heaven is Beyond Imagination, because everybody says, I don't have the words to tell you what I saw, or I can't, in my earthly mind, I can't recall what I learned there. Or there's nothing on earth that compares with it, so I have nothing to compare with. Uh, anyway, everything about it is unimaginable. So that's the history of this book. Um, I found I could publish it myself by doing all the work, the editing, the formatting, the pagination, and it was published through Kindle Direct Publishing. Now, Reader's Magnet has picked it up and they have produced it themselves, so now it's available from Reader's Magnet. Anyway, that's the history of the book. Uh, in it, I don't quote from any of the things because at first I had a lot of quotes, and I wrote to 2 publishers and asked for permission to quote from their book, and one of them said, our contract with the author precludes you quoting anything. You can't use anything. Okay, well, the second one said, yes, you can quote, but don't quote more than 300 words. Well, I had a lot more in mind than that. So I decided quoting was not going to work. I couldn't get approval. So I paraphrased everything. I took what the author said and rewrote it in my own words. A lot of those words are very similar to what the author says because I tried to capture the author's uh, spirit and experience the best I could. There's a few cases where there's a strong feeling connected with it, and I think I do a pretty good job, but it's not as good as if you went to the original and read it. One of those is when Colton Burpo told his mom, I had two sisters. And she said, well, you mean your sister and your cousin? He said, no, you had a baby die in your tummy. Well, they had never told him about that, so that got excited. So she said, he started to leave to go back to play, and she said, Colton Burpo, come back here. And started asking him about this. Who told you I had a baby die in my tummy? Well, she did. Uh, she came up to me and hugged me, and uh, I, I don't remember what else she said. Anyway, uh, mother asked, well, what's her name? And he said, she doesn't have a name. You and Dad never gave her a name. Well, they didn't give her a name because she had a miscarriage at 2 months. They didn't know it was a girl or a boy, so they had never figured out a name. Well, one lesson from this is you need to give your baby a name, and if you don't know whether it's a boy or girl, give them two names, one of each, and the angels in heaven will assign that child the appropriate name. So now the Burpos are looking forward to getting there so they can give their daughter a name. Anyway, it was a very healing experience for Mrs. Burpo to experience Colton's testimony that their daughter that they lost didn't even know where she was, is in heaven, being raised by God the Father, and is having a wonderful time and looking forward to seeing them. That was a very healing thing. And as they've shared that testimony with others, it has healed many other people who have lost children and didn't know what happened to them. Well, there's a lot of stories like that. We may get to some of them later. Um, I tried to capture the essence of what the author said, and because I've got 50 different testimonies, there's one thing we see from this is there's consistency. They're all saying essentially the same thing. They're saying it in different ways, but what that's telling us is these are real testimonies. These people could not have had the same experience if it was just hallucinations or chemicals in the brain or things like that. Secondly, it's not a made up story because different people say it in different ways. And I have testimonies from the Middle East, from America, from Europe, from Australia. These people are all in different parts of the world and different times. I don't know what the earliest one is. I think it's in the 19th century. And so they're over different times, different territories. So they could not have uh, made this story up. So we know from all of that evidence that these are real and we need to pay attention to them. In a court of law, eyewitness testimony is worth a whole lot more than expert opinion, no matter how expert the opinion is. So here we have eyewitness testimony of what heaven is like, what God has prepared for us. You can't rule it out and say it's just a figment of imagination. It's just chemicals. It is real, and it's worth paying attention to. Now, the other thing we need to know from this is that every one of these people was dramatically changed by their experience in heaven. They came back to life here with a whole new perspective on what's important in life, what God is really like, what Jesus is like, and what is the real purpose of being here. They have new priorities. Their lives changed. Some of them are more sensitive to the Holy Spirit than they used to be. Well, my hope with this book is that you can gain that same insight without having to die to get it. Dying is a problem. Usually it's an illness or an accident, and it takes time to recover. It's no fun to go through. Most people who die don't get to come back, so it's dangerous. If you aren't prepared to go there and you die, that's too bad because there is no free will after you leave this life. The only time you have free will to choose is right now. So I hope you can get a copy of the book and uh, send this for yourself. Now I'm going to read you some things to give you an idea. First of all, what are the first things people see when they get there? Well, one of the first things is what it feels like, what the emotions are. By far, the most universal experience of heaven is a love that exceeds any love that author has known on earth. This is accompanied by a total acceptance and a peace we long for on earth but don't experience to the degree it is found in heaven. As you read through this book, you will see testimony after testimony of this deep emotional experience of each person's experience in heaven. This emotion is so powerful that no one wants to come back to earth, but they all, except those who did stay and didn't come back to tell us, either recognize family members here that need them back, or Jesus sends them back on a mission to tell others, or it is just not their time to enter heaven. Tony Davis felt rays of love pouring out of the window in the clouds when he saw a huge, beautiful city. He said it was like the arms of God reached out to him and held him. But he felt so much love and compassion that he began forgiving and letting everything go more than he could imagine. Crystal McVeigh spends most of her book telling all the terrible things that happened in her life, how she broke all 10 commandments and was lost to God, including how she knew he could never forgive her. But her experience in the magnificent presence of God's love and healing healed her from all the stuff that hung over her. A gift so great she has tears of joy and gratitude, remembering what she has been a golden radiance lining the street. Somebody skipped a page. Sorry. Okay. From what she has been healed. Mary Neal said heaven glimmered with exhilaration, and on and on and on. The sights of heaven are similar to earth, but different. I'm going to read you some of the differences. Dale Black came to a radiant city bathed in a golden to white light. It gleamed with a myriad of resplendent colors, every imaginable color. The light was the purest he had ever seen. He said the music was the most majestic, enchanting, and glorious he had ever heard. The city was huge and grand. It exceeded any of the world's cities he had seen in his flying career as an airline pilot, both in size and in radiance. He didn't know how, but he knew that this place was utterly holy. The city was overwhelmingly beautiful and breathtaking. He also knew that he was made for this place and it was made for him. As he approached the city, he flew over a glorious, colorful countryside with meadows and trees and became aware of indescribable music. Ian McCormick looked through a circular shaped opening behind Jesus and saw a whole new world of meadows, fields, grass, a crystal stream, mountains, a clear blue sky, rolling green hills, and flowers. He wanted to say goodbye to the old world he had left, but then he saw his mother's face looking at him. She had prayed for him every day of his life and had tried to show him the way of God. Note here, Ian McCormick was an atheist at the time he died. But he prayed in the ambulance, the last few seconds of his life, asked for forgiveness. She had prayed for him every day of his life and had tried to show him the way of God. If he never returned, she would never know of his radical change. He knew he had to go back. Also, God showed him his family and thousands of people whom God said would not come to him if he didn't go back. So he came back. Now, in a different place, I mentioned more about his story. He was deep sea diving off the coast of Mauritius and stung by a box jellyfish. Well, box jellyfish are stings that are fatal. He knew he was in trouble. We got stung 3 more times before he got to shore. So he knew he was in trouble. And he remembered in the ambulance, his mother said, if you're ever in trouble, pray, God will hear you. Well, in the meantime, his mother was awakened by the Spirit and said, pray for your son. He's dying. So she was praying for him at that time. Well, then he tried to remember what his mother prayed, and he remembered the Lord's Prayer, but he didn't know it. He just had a few phrases. He remembered Forgive us our sins. Okay, God, please forgive my sins. And then, your will be done on earth as in heaven. Let me do your will. Well, that's all he got to, and then he died. Well, then the moment he died, he found himself in a dark, scary place. And there were voices. They weren't very happy voices. And he said, "Where am I?" And the voice said, "You're in hell. That's where you belong." Well, he saw he was in deep trouble. But that didn't last very long. Pretty soon there was a brilliant light. It was Jesus. Jesus came into his presence and took him out of there to heaven. And Jesus told him, well, that's when he looked through the window and saw this beautiful sight. Jesus told him, if you had not asked for forgiveness the last few seconds of your life, you would have stayed there. So that was the difference it made. And when he saw heaven, he said, that is what I've been looking for my whole life. I've been looking in all the wrong places. I want to stay here. And Jesus said, do you want to stay here or go back? Well, that's when he saw his mother's face. And he knew he had to go back because she would never know that he had made the change. Well, when he came back, he ended up traveling the world. Thousands of people became believers because of his testimony. So he made a big difference. Well, let's see. How are we going? We got 10 more minutes. Let me find something else here. What do we look like? That's chapter 4, personal appearances. Our bodies. Richard Sigmund saw that as each person stepped into heaven, he or she was immediately transformed into a whole and healthy person in his or her prime of life. Everyone Mary Kay Baxter saw was glorified, radiant, and handsome, and without any scars. Marvin Besteman said in the hospital he was as weak and uncomfortable as he would ever want to be. But when he was in heaven, in the waiting line to get in, he felt no weakness and was awake, alert, and strong and healthy as a horse. That's his words. He felt fantastic, better than he ever had as a young man. No one he saw there had crutches, damaged bodies, missing appendages, Down syndrome, or any other special need. All of those had been healed the moment they entered heaven. In heaven, his vision improved immediately, beyond what his glasses had done for him. His eyes, ears, brain, and body were performing far above par. He likened it to going from a broken down old jalopy to a sleek race car with a high performance engine. No one there was wearing glasses or hearing aids. Others have stated they could see in the distance better than they ever could before, and they could see flowers on the distant hillside as clearly as if they were up close, and they had perfect clear near vision also. Crystal McVeigh was suddenly aware she had left her physical body behind, was now in her spiritual body. She didn't examine it, she just knew. It didn't have defined edges or shape. She had this stunning realization that she was the, quote, me, unquote, that had existed since before she was born on earth. She was a far more complete representation of her heart and being without any of the uncertainty she might have had on earth. She was a more complete representation of her spirit and heart than was ever possible on earth. She had a deeper self-awareness than all the hopes, fears, dreams, and scars of her earthly life. She met her real self. She marvels that the first person she met in heaven was herself. Now, another one I mentioned to you. Dr. Richard Eby, as a physician, was interested in inspecting his heavenly body. He noted that his heavenly body looked like him, felt like him, and reacted like him. It was the same shape all the way down to his feet as his earthly body. He was the same size and shape as the image he had seen in a mirror that he had always known himself to be. But now, with a cloud-like body that had no pain and no presence of a peace, and had the presence of a peace that he never knew on earth. We never get to see our whole three-dimensional selves, only flat two-dimensional photographic images or reversed front view mirror images. George Ritchie in Return from Noah talks about this problem when looking for his solid part. That's another whole story. Richard Eby said his robe was translucent. He could look through it. and looked through his translucent body to the white flowers beneath and behind him. In other words, he could see through his body. This did not seem strange to him, but perfectly normal in his heavenly outlook and on things now. He could see his feet, as he was no longer nearsighted, and he had unlimited range of vision. It was sharp and clear, no matter the distance, 10 inches or 10 miles. He looked through his transparent abdomen and chest. He could see no bones, no ligaments, no vessels, no organs, no blood. Also, he had no genitals. His mind was sharper, and he immediately knew that Jesus supplies all the energy he needs. So no food or air is needed. Unlike our carnal body, with lungs, stomach, intestines, and heart, in heaven we need no food to digest or eliminate or air to breathe. Without lungs, where would their breath go? Without a stomach, where would the food go? In the chapter on fruit, people said the juice ran down their throats with exquisite taste. My guess is, at that point, it just vaporizes, like it does on their hands and faces. Willie Agnes Chanot had dentures, but in heaven she had all her normal teeth. In other words, the bodies we have in heaven are pretty much like the bodies we have here. When you leave here and go there, if you come back, you only come back to your physical body. You can't come back to another one. The physical body you have matches your spiritual body, or maybe it's the other way around. I don't know. But anyway, they fit together. It's kind of like a hand in a glove. A glove is nothing, but you stick a hand in it, the glove fits the hand perfectly, and the glove is now active and doing things. Take the hand out of the glove, and the glove is nothing. Same thing with our spirit and our bodies. The spirit indwells the body and makes the body alive. Take the spirit out of the body, and the body is lifeless, just like the glove. Put the spirit back in, and the body becomes alive again. Okay, on to another subject. Music. There is fabulous music in heaven. Mary Kay Baxter said heaven is saturated with beautiful music. It is the result of joy and expresses the happiness and joy of heaven. She heard choirs and ensembles whose splendor and beauty cannot be compared with anything on earth. It is a fantastic symphony. Stringed instruments, trumpets accompanied the music. All voices, pitches, and tones were perfect. She said that there were unbelievable anthems coming in waves of praise across the landscape. Betty Maltz and an angel were walking up the hill before the gates, and she heard her father's voice calling, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." His voice seemed a long distance away. Part of that story is she died of appendicitis. Her heart had stopped several times, but they always got it restarted. Well, this time it was 5 o'clock in the morning. Nobody was there, so the heart stopped and her spirit left her body. Well, her father was coming to see her, and he got there about that time. But he went in a back door and found her room, went to the room, and the nurse had already been there and covered her face with the sheet. And he saw that and he said, "Oh no, she's gone." Well, that's when he said, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." Well, she heard him say that. Well, eventually she decided she had to go back. She couldn't stay there. Well, back to the story here. She heard voices, melodious, harmonious, blending in chorus. Singing included the word Jesus. There were more than 4 parts in the harmony. She joined in. She had always had a low boy's voice, but there she sang in high, clear tones. Soon the chorus sang a new song. Multiple parts were in other languages, with richness and perfect blending of the words. The amazing thing was she could understand the words for each of the language. So all those people of the world could be singing the same song in different languages at the same time, and you can hear all of them, and you can understand the words. I don't know if she says it here, but you can understand every language. And there is a heavenly language that you can understand also. And another point to make here is all these voices are being used to make music. You don't use your voices to communicate in heaven. You just you're just your spirit to the other spirit. It's like mind to mind. Uh, Jesus puts an idea in your mind, and you just respond back to him, and same with everybody. So now, a consequence of that is animals are the same. They don't use their voices to talk. Well, they don't know our language anyway. But in heaven, you can communicate with animals. When you get to meet your pet there, your pet will greet you. Hi, Joe. Glad to see you. You'll be able to talk to your pet. You say, how come that other day you did such and such? Oh, I was just playing. Anyway, you can communicate with the animals. And Richard Sigmund saw some girls riding a horse, and a girl riding a horse, and he could tell that the girl and the horse were communicating with each other, and they were both having a wonderful time. Well, that's all the time we have. There's a whole much more to this story that I didn't tell you, but I hope you can get the book and read it for yourself. You will be blessed. I have gotten numerous responses back from people who said that book has made a difference. One one guy wrote to me and said his wife had just passed away and he wanted to read about people who met their spouse in heaven, and he didn't see that. So I wrote back to him and I said, well, the reason for that is here. This is my thought. If you die and go to heaven and your spouse is there, God doesn't make you come back. So the people who have spouses there didn't come back to tell us. That's why the ones who came back couldn't tell us about meeting their spouse because they never did. Um, but there is one story. Tom Olson, he and his wife and the two boys were in an auto accident. A car swerved, rolled over several times on the highway. They were all killed except the older boy. The young boy was killed. The wife was killed. The mother was killed. I mean, the dad. Well, Tom found himself. Well, he didn't die immediately. He suffered a while, and then he died. And in heaven, he met his wife. That was a glorious reunion. It was wonderful. She said, "You can't stay. You have to go back." He didn't understand why that. He didn't see the kids. Where are the kids? You have to go back. You can't stay. Our son is still there. You got to go back for him. Well, finally he understood. His son had survived, and he had to go back. Uh, so he did. But that's the only case I have where someone met their spouse. But from that, you can see that when you meet your spouse, it's going to be a wonderful experience. And one last thing about that. Richard Eby said there's no genitals. Well, you're not going to have sex in heaven. Jesus said to the Sadducees, there is no marriage in heaven. Well, in heaven, you live forever. There's no need to reproduce and make new people. But what you'll have in heaven is the relationship, the joy, the peace, the companionship, the caring. That's what will survive. That's what you'll meet there. It will be richer and better than you've ever had here. So you can look forward to that. Don't worry about the sex. That's just for this world. There are much better things that you can get with your spouse and with everyone, because heaven is all about relationships. First, our relationship with God and Jesus. Secondly, our relationships with each other. Everybody loves everybody there. In this world, people talk about utopia. Why government's going to make a utopia? Well, that never works because people are prone to sin. But in heaven, there's real utopia. There's real peace, real love, no evil. It is just a wonderful experience. You look forward to it. Read my book, and you'll be blessed also. I was blessed putting it together. It has changed my life, and it'll change yours. It's available from Amazon. It's available from Reader's Magnet. Heaven is beyond imagination. Don't I think Heaven is Amazing is still available, but don't bother to get it because it is contained in Heaven is Beyond Imagination plus the other things I added. You can get to that if you want to. It's still available. The first one is not available anymore. Uh, Anyway, anybody have any question you'd like to ask me before we go? We've only got a minute or two left. Thank you for your participation today. I hope it's been worthwhile. Well, I guess there aren't any questions. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for your attention. I don't know how many of you there are or anything about you, but you know about me now, and I'll look forward to talking to you later. Now, the next session, the next three sessions, are all about my more recent book, a novella called A Walk Through Heaven. It is about me dying and meeting my guardian angel who with another angel gives me a tour of heaven. The things about me are all true. They're autobiographical, except the fact I never died, never went there. The things I see in heaven are all taken from Heaven is Beyond Imagination. It's what people have actually seen. I just take upon myself seeing the things that they said they saw. Well, that's what we're going to talk about the next three times. First is Wednesday, the 24th at 6 o'clock. Then the next one is Thursday at 4 o'clock. And then the next one is Friday at 6 o'clock. I'm going to read the whole story to you. It takes about an hour, a little over an hour. So we're going to read the story in three parts. I think you'll enjoy that. I look forward to seeing you. You think the world has different priorities when it comes to their spirituality? Well, the world has different priorities. They aren't all from the script from the Lord. We can see that daily, that there's priorities that people have that don't fit with reality. Am I still driving to grow in this life? Every day. I am not perfect yet, and I never will be. There's always flaws that need to be fixed. I don't really love the Lord as much as I could. I don't trust Him as much as I could. I have to learn that. Every day I learn more about how to trust Him. And that's why we're here. We're here to learn to be the people that God wants us to be. Jesus has forgiven everything. I didn't cover that part. That's in my book. Anyway, yes, I'm still striving to be the person that God intended me to be, and I'm making progress. I have better priorities now than I did 20 years ago. I'm more closer to God than I was then, but I still have a long ways to go. I'll look forward to seeing you up there, and then we'll all be perfect. I think we're done. Well,